Early on in the game, you sensed that you were being excluded from the rest of the Girls' Alliance. Now that you've made it to the end as one of the final 2 women standing, how does it feel looking back on those first few weeks?
It's so crazy. I'm sure you remember this feeling, right? You're propelled into this game, you're sussing out personalities, you're trying to understand where you sit, and there's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than the feeling of, I'm supposed to be working with this group, but I can just tell that things aren't jiving. Like, what is happening? What am I not aware of? And I mean, it does feel kind of nice to be one of the, last 2 women to make it as far in this game, given how everything started out, especially given that I was backstage, Taylor was on the block week 1. No one expected us to make it as far as we did.
Had you decided to stick with the Girls' Alliance, how do you think the rest of your game would have played out? Would you have still aligned so closely with Taylor and Michael? Hypothetically, had they both resulted in the same placement, which game would you have preferred?
Ooh, that's a real tough one to say. I mean, of course, you come into the game and you kind of have these lofty aspirations, right? Like, oh, I just would love to watch a season where the Girls' Alliance makes it all the way. But as you get to know people, you suss out personalities, you build true relationships and friendships. I'm sure you can remember this. You get to know people and you figure out who you're friends with, whether they're a girl, whether they're a guy. That component of it doesn't seem to matter as much as who you get along with and who's really playing the game. When I think about the other women in the house, I respect their gameplay in a lot of different ways, but just the strategy was there with Michael and with Taylor. And I felt like I was speaking more of their language, was drawn more to them, and, ultimately played closer with them. I think it probably would have shook out that way regardless.
Kyle presented you with the Cookout 2.0 theory weeks before you decided to reveal it to the house, resulting in some feedback from your fellow house guests. If you could do it all over again, would you have chosen to reveal this information sooner, or do you think timing is everything?
Oh, that situation, I will tell you, it felt impossible, and it just weighed so heavy on my shoulders. And ultimately, I just wanted to make sure that the facts were correct, because it felt like a lose-lose situation to be in. And the only thing that I could think that would make it any potentially worse is to say that I was spreading that and it was misinformation. Perhaps I misheard what Kyle said, or I misunderstood what Kyle said. I wanted to fact check. And then, of course, you have Dire Fest thrown into the middle of that, which really shook up the game. I just wanted to make sure that I was confident before I shared this with the house guests. And, it took that amount of time.
You had a final 2 with Taylor since the beginning of the game, yet you seemed to doubt her loyalty and even went as far as voting to evict her over Alyssa when they were both on the block. So was this final 2 a real final 2, or was it just gameplay to try and gain Taylor as a number?
It's so tricky, right? A real final 2, yes, it was real in the moment. I knew that there was a very strong possibility that Michael would not make it to the end of this game, given how good he was at comps. And so if he wasn't going to make it to the end of this game, you better bet Taylor was my girl. Final 2. Things change though, and I'm sure you remember, you have to be adaptable. You have to include new information, and especially as Michael was leaving and directly after, I felt some distance between Taylor and I. Something seemed kind of up. I know she had been getting increasingly closer with Monty. You just have to take in all the new information. And I wasn't quite sure where she was at. And I also knew that I felt alone and that I had to look at this strategically and determine, okay, if my only strategy is that I stay here as long as I win, what is going to increase my chances of winning this next comp? And, if I compared Alyssa and I compared Taylor, I knew Taylor was a stronger competitor. So if this plan were to go through, and let me tell you, I did not have very high hopes that it would go through. I knew I could play it either way, whether Turner voted her out or not. I knew that ultimately at the end of the day, if I was competing against Alyssa, I'd have a better chance of winning. And wouldn't you know, the next HOH, it comes down to me and Taylor in a tiebreaker vote, and I lose that HOH to Taylor. If I had been playing against Alyssa, who knows? Maybe I would have won.
Now, when you finally came clean about your vote flip to evict Taylor, you told her that it was because you wanted Monty to break the vote. But if this were the case, why would you and Alyssa come up with a plan to try to get a sympathy vote from Turner? What was your true intention here?
you know, my true intention was that it could have gone either way. I think at the time I felt like it was probably an 80% probability that Turner was not going to give that sympathy vote to Alyssa, and maybe a 20% chance that he would. Either way, like I said before, if he did flip, then that would increase my chances strategically of winning that next comp. But the far more likely scenario was that he was not going to flip and it would just create a tie. Of course, I was very happy with that scenario as well. Taylor is my girl. I would love to keep her in this game, personally. But I also knew that, I was already being targeted. I couldn't be any more targeted than I already was. So if there was any chance that this flip could cast any shadow of a doubt on Turner and Monte and Taylor's eyes, that was a chance I was willing to take. And at the very least, Monte would actually have to roll up his sleeves, break that tie vote, and get some blood on his hands. And, that seemed like he should have to do that for that kind of decision.